Hey everybody, this is Jason Mefford, Brad Miller. We're here doing a spiritual campfire session. Today it's just Brad and myself, but we're going to go through and just kind of talk about some things because even when people don't join us, we show up during this time, and usually he and I talk about some of the things that we would normally talk about with a bigger group anyway. And so we thought it would be beneficial, even though it's just the two of us, to record today's session so it can be in the library for people to go back as a reference for. Okay, so Brad, I
Yeah.
purposely I don't know what we're talking about yet because I kind of kept pushing you off until we hit record. So,
hmm
what's the topic? What are we doing?
What do we need to talk about today? Today, something that's been on my mind for a while, um, and something we actually talked about a little bit, at least mentioned, on the last podcast episode that we recorded, or I talked up, or maybe the one before. I don't know, we were kind of recorded on back to back, but um, it was the fact that I kind of have this draw, this urge to serve, to do something to help people. And I think we talked about it in the context of altruism, service to others, Aini, and things like that. That there's not a desire to get something necessarily out of this. That I'm not trying to, I'm not saying, well, I need to do this because I want to make millions of dollars doing it. It's not that I want the recognition or feel good. It's just something inside says I want to serve. Like that's just kind of what keeps on pushing me, that I need to do something. And that again, kind of is what this spiritual campfire kind of sprang out of. And ultimately, this is what the podcast kind of sprang out of as well. Is just this desire to serve in some manner. And I've known for a while that the service is not through my law practice.
Mhm.
Um, it I going into it might be helpful to have a little bit of backstory, especially for those who may be kind of new to this. I went to law school not because I wanted to be a lawyer necessarily, because I had these ideas of justice and serving, all this, whatever stuff that sometimes people go to law school. I went because I wanted to be a judge. I had
Mhm.
seen, watched different TV shows like The Practice and things, and saw the judges on there, and was like, whatever reason, I kind of want to be like that. I want to do that. And I knew the way to do that is first you got to go to law school and you got to be a lawyer. And then as a lawyer, then you can be a judge. So I, kind of went down that order, but I never really saw myself as, being a lawyer, being a long-term deal. It was always leading up to being a judge. So did the whole thing, got into law school, got out into practice, and saw what judges actually do. Got actual courtrooms and got to see judges doing what judges actually do on a day-to-day basis. And I'm like, this sucks. This is not what I want to be doing. Like this is
Especially like, yeah, you want to be a family law judge? Oh, no, thank you very
no,
much.
yeah, no, the drama they have to deal with, and the fact that there's so much weight put on you to do things, and you have very little time to prepare for it. Like you get a motion that you're supposed to be ruling on has significant consequences, and you you don't have time to really look into it, to get to know the issues, maybe to get to know the law behind it, or the subject matter that it's dealing with. You just kind of have to go with whatever. And you're always bouncing one thing to the other. You never really got good in one thing, because one day you may be having criminal docket and do criminal cases. The next day you might be having, a trial on a dog bite case or something, and then you're going to something else, and it was never the same thing. You never got to be good at anything because it's always something different every day. And I'm like, that just doesn't appeal to me.
Mhm.
They don't get paid enough for what they do. They don't get appreciated for what they do. Everyone is always, pissed off one way or the other about what's happened. You didn't treat me fair. I didn't like your decision, whatever it might be. So judge was out. So okay, I'm a lawyer now, right? Um, and so that was part of my identity. Kind of, I'm kind of a lawyer, law student, all this stuff. And then and I've talked about this other places, but at some point the identity kind of shifted to the point where today lawyer is way down the list as far as how I identify. I identify as a father before I identify as a lawyer. I identify as a spiritual person more than I do a lawyer. Um, and so it's come to the point where, again, like I said, I've known this for a while now, for a couple of years at least, that being a lawyer is not the thing that I'm here for. That it is not the thing that like gets me up jumping out of bed in the morning. It's like, oh, I get to be a lawyer and I get to do these things. The law is a tool at this point for me. It's a way that I can help people, but I think that there's something greater out there for me to be doing. Whether that includes still being a lawyer, I don't know. But I know that there is something else out there that's not the actual practice of law that I need to be looking into. So that is a long-winded backstory to get to the point of I'm trying to figure out what that kind of thing is looking like. Um, I know that I enjoy things like one-on-one conversations with people, particularly other lawyers who are solos or own their own practices. And this is the group that I kind of connect with and resonate with. And I think this is where ultimately what I do lies with this group of people. But I like talking with them and helping them figure out how to be happier, how to uh, get their law practice designed so that they actually can have a life that they enjoy living, that they can do things they want to do. Um, Too many lawyers are kind of slaves of their practices. The practices is out there, and they are trying to fit everything else around the law practice. And I think that's a unhealthy model, one that makes for unhappy lawyers. And at the end of the day, not only do I want lawyers just in general to be happy, but I also know that if lawyers are happy, that's going to end up translating into happy clients because they're going to get better service. Um, and so it ultimately is going to make a bigger impact if I can start there on everyone that they're in contact with. One lawyer has how many clients, so you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I've been hesitant. And so part of it is trying to figure out what is the hesitation and what I needed to do to get past that hesitation, to start actually doing something with it.
Yeah, no, and I think it's I've gone through the same thing. I'm going
Yeah.
through some of the same things now, right?
Yeah.
And I think what um again, for people who are listening to the recording afterwards, I'll give you some commentary here. This seems like we're having a very 3D discussion, but this is a spiritual discussion,
Mhm.
and I'll explain why now. Because as we move forward on the path, there comes a point for everybody. It's different times and in different ways, and in different levels of intensity. But we realize there's a higher calling and a higher purpose why we're here on this earth. And what happens a lot of times is people think whatever they do to make their money, that that has to be the same as their dharma. And so what ends up happening is you watch people who give up, let's say, multi six figure corporate executive job to now go be a hypnotherapist
Yoga teacher.
or yoga teacher or a coach or something, right? Because it seems like everybody, when they start going on this path, they want to do like a self-help kind of a thing to earn their money. And there's danger in doing that, meaning that you get somebody, and I've seen lots of people, you've probably seen lots of people this way too. They, like I said, they leave a multiple six-figure corporate job because they're not happy in their job and they're going to go after their dharma. And then they struggle to make 30 or 40 or $50,000 a year, going from, maybe 10 times that much, which puts financial pressure on themselves, on their family, on everything else. That leads to all kinds of other emotional, psychological types of things, and so one of the points to get clear that I'm more clear on now is there's a difference between your dharma and your 9 to 5. And there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with having a 9 to 5 that may seem different than your dharma, but it's not in a way. And I'll explain it because you even just said it, Brad, and you probably didn't even realize it. And so, what that means is, but it's the mix and how you're doing it, right? So,
Mhm.
like you said, lawyers are classic examples of this, right? Because most people become lawyers because they were expected to become a lawyer, or they want to make lots of money. Then they work 80 or 90 hours a week. They never see their family. They're making $1 million a year, providing well for their family. Their family's off at their vacation homes and on vacation by themselves while mom or dad is, still working.
Right.
That's again where it's out of balance. And
Mhm.
so on the spiritual path, that's why people start to burn out or look at that and say, well, I'm not really living my life, right? My job controls me and my career controls me.
Mhm.
And it does. You become a slave to that at the expense of everything else in your life, right? And so what ends up happening is, usually earlier in our career is the main focus. I was that way too. I was working 80, 90 hours a week, whatever it took to get promoted, get ahead, make more money. But now I realize that's not what's important, right?
Mhm.
You still have to have a 9 to 5 because we all have to eat, right? We all can't run away and be monks and live in Tibet or do things like that. But that's not what we're all expected to do either. And I think that's what's important is a lot of people get this, dream in their head that we all have to run away and be yogis or in a monastery somewhere in order to be on the path. But that's not what it is. I mean, again, in the group that I work with, close to DX, it's like everybody has a job. They're all
Mhm.
different. Yes, some people are retired now, but everybody has a job. But the difference is their 9 to 5 doesn't control their life.
Right.
Their spiritual involvement, their dharma controls their life. They do what they need to in the 9 to 5 to survive, to make it. Some of them make a ton of money, a lot of money in what they do for a living. Others just have enough to get by. And there's no judgment, there's no right or wrong one way or the other, with it.
Mhm.
But I think what's important too is whatever we do in our 9 to 5, it's how we choose to show up,
Mhm.
the intention we have, the awareness we have, the person that we're being, because you said happy lawyers equal happy clients. That's true,
Mhm.
right? And so if you can help lawyers have a better lifestyle, if you can help them start to see that making money is not the end of all
Yep.
ends, but that having peace in your life, loving, relationships with family and friends and, spiritual, personal growth, when that switches and that becomes more important, then that radiates to everybody else. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like to work with leaders too in corporations, because I figure
Mhm.
if the leader is doing the right thing, think of all the ripple effect that has down the line to people.
Mhm.
Again, it's not because I wake up in the morning and I go, ooh, but for whatever reason, I chose my academic and vocational path, to do what I'm doing now. And so while I'm willing to just throw it all away if that's what I'm told to do, I
Mhm.
don't think that's what I'm being told to do. But I've obviously needed to balance and prioritize and do some things, with my schedule, with which of the businesses I, go all in on and which ones I kind of let coast
Mhm.
because my spirituality is important. And
Mhm.
people listening probably don't know, but it's like some days I have a hard time getting started before 11 or 12 o'clock my time, just because of things that are going on. So I have to work my 9 to 5 in a way that allows my schedule to be more flexible because I never know what's going to happen. I could get
Mhm.
hit energetically and all of a sudden it's like, man, I got to go lay down for an hour. I don't know.
Yeah, I did that last week. I had to take a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, at least that's kind of one thing to start with is we got to think of them as two different things.
They're two different things, but yet the spirituality is not distinct and separate from everything else
Correct.
because it goes it encompasses everything. And so that's part of the, I don't want to say struggle, but that's part of the challenge for me is that yes, there are these two, the distinct separation of things, but yet spirituality is part of all of it.
Hmm.
And so maybe some of it is how do I incorporate more spirituality into the law practice, you know?
Yep.
Um,
Well, and
yeah.
because of that, like you said, you can't separate the two. And some people try to do this. They're
Mhm.
like a bastard in business and they're fucking people over and, doing
Flipping off babies and old women. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
things that from a business perspective, but it's like you can't show up as that kind of a person in your business and expect it not to affect you in the rest of your life. And
Mhm.
so what ends up happening, and this is um how to say this, because again, DX told this to somebody that I know. He said, what you do is not going to change. What people see you doing will seem the same, but it's totally different, right? Meaning that, okay, this person has had a business for a long time. And I know, I'm not going to tell you who it is per se, but they've had a successful business for a long time. They're probably going to continue to be doing to the outside world what it seems like they've been doing for
Mhm.
years. But the quality of people who they're working with and some of the others, maybe what seem to be subtle differences in how this person is showing up in their business is completely different. And because of that, I mean, literally, some of the spiritual work is us just being with and talking with other people, even if it's about nothing to do with spirituality, because they feel our energy. They're
Mhm.
surrounded by our light. They're lifted up because of that, right? So again, it's like people need lawyers, people need accountants. It's like I'm doing some tax work again that I never thought I would do, but it's like, but I'm helping people who really need the help. And it's not that I'm, like one client that just came in, they were looking at a huge tax bill because their CPA was just, I don't know what they were doing. I'm like, you're not going to owe that much in taxes, but we got to do a bunch of stuff different.
Mhm.
Right. And so they were into fear and anxiety about having to write this multiple six-figure check that they didn't have cash for. Right.
Mhm.
And so me helping them even from a 3D perspective, what does that help them do? Reduce that anxiety and fear.
Yep.
And so, with me helping them do that, what does it do? Helps elevate their vibration.
Mhm.
And so even though it's not like, all right, everybody, let's sit down and meditate before we work on your tax return. You can do that if you want to. Some people might.
That would be an
And
interesting brand.
well,
Yeah.
but it's not actually so out of the ordinary. Rick Rubin, who's one of the best music producers of all time, at the beginning of his Anderson Cooper interview, he said, Anderson, we're just going to sit and meditate here for a couple of minutes if you'd allow me to do that before we start. And Anderson's like, whatever, okay. And so he did it. And they recorded the whole thing. And actually they put parts of that clip in there. Like Anderson was like, I thought you were like crazy when you asked me to do that, but man, I feel so much different right now. I feel so calm. This is great, right?
Mhm.
So we can, incorporate things like that into it. But even if we don't, we're helping people elevate,
Mhm.
even by doing what seems like a very 3D thing. So, people need lawyers. They need happy
Mhm.
lawyers that help and protect and take care of them,
Yeah.
too. So I don't know. I guess that's part of what I have come to. And like I said, there's only, but everybody goes through this, and we think the universe is asking us to throw it all away, what we've done before. But I don't think that's really what's happening. It's just a part of an identity shamanic death for us to go through
Mhm.
to release attachment to it. But it
Mhm.
doesn't mean sell everything you have, live in
Mhm.
poverty, go live in a monastery for the rest of your life. Because there's only one person that I know of who was told that. Okay. Um, and yeah. So even, again, everybody else that I know, we all feel like we have to do that. But at the end of the day, then we start realizing, well, no. And it doesn't necessarily matter what I do for my 9 to 5.
Mhm.
What matters is how I show up. And gee, if I chose this path for some reason beforehand, then maybe there's some reason for that in some way that I'm supposed to use this to help me
Mhm.
make money.
Yeah. Well, I know that part of the reason why everything happened for me as it has is so that I can identify with and understand these lawyers. Because otherwise,
Because if you
without
didn't have that experience, you wouldn't know how they feel.
exactly, so I can go through and I can say, I've done that, I've been here, here's my experience doing it. So now I can share with you what I've gone through or, whatever. And so I know that is part of the reason why um, that kind of had to happen the way it did. And I definitely don't feel like I need to shut down my law practice tomorrow and go further into the woods than I already am. Um, and and just kind of be a, like you said, a hermit meditating all day. Although sometimes that does sound very attractive
Mhm.
to do. Um, yes, I don't feel that that is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I said, I have no problem keeping the law thing going. I know that there's benefit there, that there's people that are getting service through there that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So there's benefit to doing that, and I have no problem keeping that. It's this other side, however, that where my attention wants to go all the time. Like it doesn't really want to focus on the law practice that much. It wants to do this other stuff, but the extent of what this other stuff ends up being is me getting on LinkedIn and posting things and commenting on stuff and um, all related to helping lawyers be happier and those kind of stuff. But that is kind of where I end up spending a lot of my day is doing things like that, which and because I enjoy it, and I find it more, and that's just kind of where I'm kind of drawn to that stuff. And so part of it is there something else, what else can I be doing in that direction besides just posting on LinkedIn all day with it?
Well, you'll know when you know, I think that's what, because this kind of came out because we were talking about darkness before, and again, it's one of those things that DX has told me for years now, and it's finally starting to kind of click a little bit more, is because he always would says something like, I hope the darkness helps you to see, and he says, when I say that to people, it seems weird, and it seems like I'm telling people to work in the darkness, right? Because sometimes we use those terms of people working in the light and light workers and dark workers, right?
Right.
But that's not what it means, right?
Hmm.
But that going into the darkness and being comfortable in the darkness, uh, is kind of a giving up control. It's part of the process.
Hmm.
It's very shamanic in nature, in the practices of doing it and certain practices that you can do uh, in the darkness. But for us from a 3D perspective, it feels at first like, well, I can't see. Like if we
Hmm.
close our eyes and it's like, well, I can't see. Well, you can if you get used to it, right? It's just like at night, if you go outside at night, because I go outside all the time because I'm still smoking, and I go outside when it's dark, and when I first go outside, I can't see anything, right? I have to
Hmm.
turn on because it's dark sky area. There's no lights around really. I have to turn my light on to kind of walk around the house to where my chair is. Then I turn my light off and I sit there for 10 or 15 minutes and I do some practices and thinking and other stuff. And sure enough, when I get up to walk back inside, what happens? I don't need my light to walk back
Hmm.
inside. Now, from a 3D perspective, we know what's causing that, right? In the darkness, our eyes dilate, take in more of the light so we can actually see, right?
Hmm.
So there's a physical thing that happens to us here, but it's the same thing with us spiritually. The more you stare into the darkness, the more you play with or practice with the abyss, the easier it becomes to actually see and perceive in the darkness because the light blinds us in so many ways. It distracts us, right? Where the darkness, you have to be in the present moment. If you're walking in pitch black, you have to be very aware of where you're stepping and what you're doing. Usually we have our hands out to make sure we don't run into things, right? We're much
Hmm.
more present in that moment. And that's one thing that the darkness allows us to do. And even though we don't think we're seeing because we're expecting to see like we see with our 3D eyes,
Hmm.
we can still perceive if we trust and allow those things to come in. Because when you go into the darkness, the light will appear. But you have to go into the darkness for the light to appear. We have to get over being afraid of the dark.
Nightlight.
But see, night light kind of defeats the purpose from what you're
Right.
trying to do.
Hmm.
But we want to hold on to a night light because we don't want to let go. And see, that's what some of the shamanic deaths, in a way, do is they force us out of the light into the darkness, stripping our identities, all these different things. Why? Because it puts us back in the present moment, back in the darkness, back in the having to, figure these things out and stumble around in the darkness for a little while. But
Hmm.
that's the process. Light to darkness, destruction, creation, these polarities, that we're going through. Um, yeah, I'm no different. I mean, again, I told you, I just shut down my one podcast that's been going the longest, and it's like I don't know why. Doesn't make any sense to me, but it was very clear from the universe that I need to take what I'm calling an indefinite hiatus because I don't know if I'll ever use that brand again or not, or if that's just the end of it. But
Hmm.
I had to be willing to let go and walk away for some reason that I don't understand yet.
Hmm.
So I made the decision. I stepped into the darkness. The light hasn't come yet on what's next for me, but I have to be willing to be in the darkness for a while until my eyes dilate spiritually, and then it becomes clear.
Mhm. Well, the other thing that kind of came to mind as you're saying this is the idea, when it is dark from a 3D standpoint, your other senses started getting more sensitive.
Mhm.
So your hearing becomes more sensitive, your sense of touch, you start relying on those other senses because you don't have that sight, which is kind of what we as humans primarily, rely on.
Mhm.
But I think you can also then translate that on a spiritual level as well. Is that
Mhm.
when you're in the darkness, you don't have the vision, the 3D vision, your other senses start to become more attuned.
Well, and sometimes too, because our eyes can play tricks on us,
Hmm.
right? There's all kinds of optical illusions that we see with our 3D eyes, right? Um, there are we'll use that picture that you sent me as an example. Okay. Brad sent me a picture of somebody and said, there's something, there just seems something not right with this person. Tell me what you see, sort of a thing,
Hmm.
right? And again, I mean, the person, makeup, all kind of whatever, and picture taken, right? And so for most people, just looking at that picture, they would say, oh, pretty, happy, nice, smile, whatever, right? Because that's the mask this person was putting on. You can put on makeup, you can put on fancy clothes, you can make yourself look, you can put a prosthetic face on, you can do all kinds of things to make yourself look like something to someone's 3D eyes.
Hmm.
But when you actually see in the darkness and sense the energy and see behind the facade that the light is tricking you into seeing, you know that that person was something totally different than what they were portraying themselves to be. Right. And so again, I mean, I told you what I saw, and I saw something, and I'm like, okay, well, my partner's pretty good at this too. I'm just gonna show her the picture and see what she says. And it was almost the same. I'm like, okay, here you go, Brad. Yeah, her first thing was, oh, that's not good.
Well,
Hmm.
and again, there are no coincidences. I saw a picture of this person today, a new picture of this person today, online, and had a similar. It was kind of a quick glance as I'm scrolling through, and just kind of had this feeling something's off, to the point I just kind of scroll right past. Like I didn't even
Yep.
stay on it. I'm just like something's off there. It just feels off, and just kept going. Um,
But see, I think that's why too, the darkness and trying to start to actually see, not see with our 3D eyes, but see from our higher perspective, see the energy, sense really what's going on behind the scenes. Not the words that people are saying, but the energy behind the words. I know we talked about that on the podcast before.
yeah.
It's the way people present themselves too. It's like, hey, I don't shower or comb my hair. I'm just going to show up as I am, right? I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. You either see me for who I am or you don't. I'm not going to put on any kind of a farce to try to make myself be any different than who I really am. So people love me, hate me, something in the middle, it doesn't matter because I'm just going to show up how I am, right? And people can sense it themselves. Um, but that's where, the darkness helps us to start seeing where we're being tricked, you know, where we're not seeing clearly, right? Because clarity blinds. Don't let your clarity blind you. Is another thing I've been taught. Don't let your clarity blind you. Because a lot of times we feel like, oh, I see it. I know exactly what it is. I've seen this before. And it's like, really? Don't let your clarity blind you. Are you really seeing what you think you're seeing? Um, and that's where, this kind of practice or getting used to it is so helpful too. Because now we start to see things because alternative realities are not what we see in the 3D. It's not what we see in the 3D. Okay. And so that's part of it too, is when you start to see some of these concurrent timelines or other dimensions or other things that come on, people freak out because it doesn't match the 3D world that we're living in. And it gets to be confusing. Right. And so again, but it's like, don't let your 3D perceptions and expectations, indoctrinations, right, lead
Mhm.
you into being blind when you can see with your eyes, but you're blind. You don't see things that other people see. And one of the guys that I know is a professional speaker, blind para athlete, gold medalist guy. He could see things being blind that people with their sight could not see. And it was just amazing to me when I would kind of, talk to him, spent some time with him at one of the conferences, and it's like, wow. And now that's kind of coming full circle for me again as I am experiencing and practicing more in the darkness. Right. But again, to say I'm practicing in the darkness makes
Right.
everybody feel like I'm over here doing some satanic rituals and
Right. You get the
sacrificing
voodoo dolls
things.
going on and
Yeah, no,
yes.
but that's not, it's light work, but it's in the darkness. And it's a lot deeper than even just that. But I don't know how much or how far we're supposed to go talking about this
Right. We don't want to
today.
scare people out way too far on the very, on this first one here. Um, so this is not where I expected this conversation to go, which is
Hmm.
not a bad thing.
Well, where were you expecting it to go, or what did you want? What did you want to get
It
out of it? Because I know you
want
were
is
kind of asking it from a question of helping you to get guidance. So,
right, and want is not the right word, because there wasn't a expectation or some sort of a here's what I feel like I need to get out of this conversation. Some of it was I think that this is going to be beneficial to have a discussion for others who may listen to this.
yeah.
That the things we're going to be talking about are going to have um, benefit for them as well. So it's not just us talking, but it's for others too. Um, and so there was again no expectations about what may come out of it. After almost 100 episodes of this podcast, I've started to, I got to the point where I'm like, I don't have expectations going in where we're going to end up because who knows what may pop up in the
Because
middle.
that's the way I roll, Brad.
That is the way you roll. No, and those are those are the best actually episodes is the ones where we don't know where things are going to end up. I used to try to plan out kind of okay, so I want to talk about this, and I think we should talk about this and this, and try to come up with a list of things to talk about. Like I've got a list somewhere that I saved when we first started doing this of 20, 30 different topics. I've not looked at that list in a year plus, because it's a lot more beneficial to come up with whatever is needs to be talked about, and what we started with may not be where we end, but there's more benefit from that, I think, than trying to follow a script of today we're talking about this topic, um, and so
Well, and what I will
I
say, okay, yeah.
no, I was just gonna say that kind of going into a lot of this stuff, like today, it was a very 3D type of a beginning, and it quickly went beyond that, which I think is great. Um,
Yeah, and I think maybe even, for you to consider is what you just said right there is some of your answer too. You just gave yourself your answer,
I'm
right?
sure
Because
yeah.
yeah, because one of the things that you asked was, well, I really enjoy going on to LinkedIn and doing these things to kind of make people feel happy.
Mhm.
Good. If that's what you feel like you're supposed to do, just like if that feels like what we're supposed to talk about on a podcast episode, then do that today. If tomorrow or later today you feel like something else, right? Because here's the thing that's important is whatever we do, you know, if we can do it from a place of love, from a place of gratitude, from a place of happiness or well-being, that's the energy, that's the vibration we're supposed to be in. And
Mhm.
so do the things that make you happy, right? Joseph Campbell, mythology, find your bliss, right? He always told his students, find your bliss, right? We're all on heroic journeys, but find your bliss. Because when you're doing something that is blissful for you, it's satisfying for you, but it also radiates your energy out into the world. And so the more of every day that we can spend our time doing what brings us that joy, what brings us that bliss, the better.
Mhm.
Yes, we still have to have a 9 to 5. We still got to make some money. Sometimes, copying email addresses to create an email list is not my favorite thing to do, right? But it's a part of the job and part of the bigger picture of what I'm, trying to accomplish in my businesses. And yes, I need to make money, but that's not my primary objective anymore, right? It's
Mhm.
serving people and the money will follow.
Yeah.
And that's the transition I think that most people start to make on their spiritual path. Only a lot of times when people get to that point, they think, well, I only want to serve and I don't need to make money. What? You can do a lot more good in this world with money than without
Mhm.
money. Because, and again, not just for you personally and your family personally, but the things you're able to do to help
Mhm.
other people or to do things like that, right?
Sure, money's a resource, and
It's
the
a
more resources you
it's a
have, the more you
resource.
can do with it.
Exactly. And the more it puts you in certain positions to help others
Mhm.
with
Right.
either your skill gifts or your money gifts, as well when they're in a time of need, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, you can't help someone else if you're worried about where you're going to get your next meal or you're
Mhm,
going to pay your bills.
mhm, mhm.
Like your focus is there, your energy is someplace else, and it's not on the service component. So
Yep.
yeah, it's the idea you got to make sure your oxygen mask is gone first before you start going out and helping everybody else in the plane. Because if you can't breathe and don't have the air, then you're not helping them at all.
No.
So I think some of it is just that there's, and again, some of this is intellectually understand these things. Um, but there's still every once in a while I get a little twinge of guilt that I'm not focusing more time on the law practice or something that's going to be bringing in more money, for instance, that I am spending, you know, 2/3 of my day on LinkedIn and stuff like that. Um, and I know, and again, I know that's 3D level stuff. Um, and some of it is just becoming aware of it.
Mhm. Well, but
That's
if you, because this is a real, I mean, it's a challenge I've been going through for the last 3 years, and I think I'm getting it now because I used to be the same way, you know. But the not doing is as important as the doing, and so a lot of times it doesn't. Well, I guess when you think about it that way, and whenever it's the Tanal coming in telling you, look, Brad, you need to spend more time on the 3D. Quit messing around with that spiritual stuff. Quit messing around with trying to make people feel happy. right? Look out for number one, me oh my, make a bunch of money and work really hard, right? That's what the Tao's kind of telling to you. But, you know, there's no reason to feel any guilt if you can answer, these kind of questions, right? It's like, is your family going without? Do you have the basic things of life that you need to survive? Do you have enough uh, for what you need? Because I think that's one of the traps that a lot of people kind of fall into is there's never enough money. They're always searching for more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And literally people with $100 million in the bank, and they're still trying to make more and more and more money. And it's like, how much is enough? If you have sufficient for your needs and you're happy, do you need more? I don't know, right? Everybody answers that question differently, probably. But I know
Hmm.
I have spent so much less time working and so much less time on my businesses the last few years. And I was worried at first, but now I just know that there's always enough money for everything that I need. I can't even tell you how much money exactly I have in the bank account in my bank accounts right now. I don't know. I know I always have enough to have
Hmm.
everything I need and the things that I want, while kind of curbing my, greedy uh, greediness or whatever, that we end up having here, in the world of, I can only wear one pair of shoes at a time. Now I have more than one pair of shoes,
Sure.
but I don't need 500 pairs of shoes.
Yeah, you don't need one for every day of the week. But you
No,
know the difference and never repeat
you
and all
know,
that stuff. Yeah.
I need different ones for different things. I need hiking boots, right? I have a pair
Hmm.
of hiking boots. I've got two pairs of my leather boots that I wear most of the time. But honestly, I'm in the house most of the time. So I have my leather moccasins and I have, sheep lined slippers that I wear most of the time in the house, depending on whether it's hot or cold.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have a couple pairs of sandals or some other things like that, but maybe 10, that's all I need, right? For
Hmm.
for some of the different things. I don't need more than that. And I
Hmm.
think that too, even though it seems very 3D, is part of the spiritual path. And that's why sometimes too, certain people have to go through, and we all probably need to be poor at some point in our life and
Hmm.
remember what it's like to be poor. So we can have compassion for people that are in that situation, but also so we can be grateful for what we have. But you can see too that again, some people have been poor, they make a lot of money, and they become poor again. Why?
Hmm.
There's a lesson that they have to learn, right? And a lot of times it's because they're attached to the money. They're attached to their business. They're attached to being a whatever, lawyer, doctor, CPA. And it has
Athlete.
to get an athlete. Oh man, I'll tell you, because these guys retire when they're 30. And then what am I going to do for the next 70 years of my life? Right? It's a
And they've got this
huge,
lifestyle where they're spending millions of dollars at a time.
yeah. And it can't sustain it when you're no longer making the money.
Yep.
And so but see, those are spiritual lessons. Those are detachments that we have to come to um, over time.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
don't know why
No.
why I went there for a little while too.
No. I no. I felt kind of the same as far as not doing as much work on the law practice. Um, obviously the pandemic has changed things. Before that I would go and network with people and do, a lunch or a coffee, maybe once. once or twice a week, and that kind of stuff, and networking and all. And since the pandemic, that's kind of curbed. Now I've moved, so I'm not really around people like that all the time, whatever. But I've actually made more money this year than than I have the last several years, and I feel like I've done less work to do that. And at first, I kind of felt a little guilty about that, but then I was like, no, this is me allowing. It's me not worrying about it, because had always been a worry about not enough money, and where's the money going to come from, and how am I going to pay the bills and things. And I've made a concerted effort the last year or so to become aware of when that happens and remind myself, no, don't worry about it. Everything always has been, is now, and will always be fine. It
Mhm.
will always be enough money. Always something will come up when it needs to happen. And it has.
Mhm.
Maybe not the way that I thought it would. Maybe, the money that I had for something set aside, I've used other places, and, but it's all worked out, you know?
Yeah, and it always does, and that's the irony of the whole thing is we get worried about doing less work and spending more time on our dharma or spiritual practices or other stuff that brings us bliss
Hmm.
and joy. But the more we do that, the more the universe makes up for the less time that we're spending in our business. That makes sense. And there's always things that come up. And at times when we probably somewhat least expect it to happen. But the less attachment we have to money, the less attachment we have to our businesses. It doesn't mean that we're ignoring or neglecting them,
Right.
but the less attachment we have there, the more time we're actually spending in the greater service. And that can look different for everybody, right? You spending time on LinkedIn trying to help people be happy is of service, right?
Hmm.
I don't want to be there all the time, but that's why I started creating those memes that you see come across every week because I schedule them out. And I've got, I think, 60 or 70 of them, and I'm gonna get like 180 of them, and then I'm just gonna let them keep replaying all the time.
Hmm.
But the whole reason that I'm doing those is the same thing. I know there's a lot of shit that goes through people's feeds.
Hmm.
And I hope, or my intention is, that as people are scrolling through, it's either going to make them laugh because some of them are funny,
Hmm.
or it's going to make them stop and think,
Yeah.
and maybe change some of their beliefs. And so that's my intention behind it.
Hmm.
Um, Not to make money, now maybe I will indirectly from it. I don't know. But when I'm doing those things, the other things just happen,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's not what I was expecting. Like I said, this tax client walked through my door and it's like not cha-ching, but kind of like cha-ching. It's like, oh, well, this is
Hmm.
going to be a nice piece of work, for the
Hmm.
last part of this year that I wasn't expecting.
Right.
Um, and it always something always makes up for it, and even when I look at my business income over the years, and it always goes up and down. Business income always goes up and down if
Yep.
anybody's actually in business, right?
That's right.
So you get used to it. um but it doesn't matter how much I make or don't make, I always have more than enough, even though on paper it doesn't logically make any sense. Right, if you start adding up the numbers, but I always have more than what I need.
Hmm.
And so I think that's part of kind of a faith side of it from a spirituality perspective is, there's that one of the quotes from Jesus in the Bible where he says, your heavenly Father knows of every sparrow and provides for them and knows when any of them fall dead. And if he knows that for them, What do you think he's doing about you? Effectively kind of paraphrasing, right?
Mhm.
That if the birds and everything always have enough, why wouldn't we too? Right? We just think it's different because of the last, few hundred years in our economic structure and how we have jobs now and all these other things where indigenous cultures didn't do it in the same way,
Mhm.
right? But they always had enough for what they needed, except for times of famine and some of the other stuff that happened. But,
But there are reasons for that.
yeah, and there's deeper reasons for all that stuff too. But yeah, what's to say that no matter how much you work, if you're doing the work, if you're helping, in the bigger cosmic game, doing what you're supposed to be doing from your Dharma perspective, the 9 to 5 is going to get taken care of.
Mhm.
Mhm. So I don't know if that was what you were thinking, but I have been experiencing a lot of the same things, Brad.
Yeah. Well, and
And
again, I know.
it was hard for me at first,
Yeah.
really hard for me at first. Um, but it's getting easier. I'm getting more used to it.
Right. Well, and again, that's the case with the sitting and not working as much. Like I said, at first I felt very guilty. I'm sitting here and there's days by when I'm like, I didn't really do anything productive for my law practice, and I felt a little bit guilty about that. Um, but I know the longer this has been going on and I still can see things happening, it's gotten so much easier to be able to like, it's fine. It's it's a Tuesday. It'll be all right. Like, tomorrow the sun will rise and I'll have time to do things again. And if not, there are bigger issues than that to worry about. And you
Mhm.
know, um, yeah, like you said, it's just getting, over time gets easier.
Well, and that's why too. I mean, I know you kind of, what is the thing? How else am I supposed to be serving, right?
Hmm.
And when we know after we've been in the darkness for long enough, because I'm in that same situation, it's like,
Hmm.
use your gifts. Okay, well, what are my gifts? I know I've got gifts. I think I kind of know what some of them are, but I'm not sure what some other ones are. Well, we'll know when we know.
Hmm.
And I think part of the way that we know is just by going for the bliss, doing some of the things that just feel good for us or that we feel inspired that we're supposed to do, even if it feels like we're going down a rabbit hole that has nothing to do with, what we're doing.
Hmm.
And just allow kind of the plan to unfold
Hmm.
as we ride the wave and go through it. Not try to resist it, but actually, allow more. It kind of reminds me of that movie. What was I can't remember. Wasn't a Jim Carrey movie where he had to say yes all the time.
Yeah. Liar, liar.
Liar, liar. Was it?
Is that what you're thinking of, or
Well, where he had to say yes, or if it was Yes Man or something. Anyway, the movie
oh, he's
was,
in a different one. Okay.
yeah, he got like programmed and he had to decided to start saying yes to everything
Hmm.
instead of no, right?
Yeah,
Because
I never saw that one, but I know what you're talking about,
he would
though.
always say no, and instead he had to start saying yes to everything. And just the amazing kind of path that his life kind of took by actually being open and willing to say yes to things that were crazy, right? In comparison before to him.
Hmm.
Um, but that he still, was able to do. and
Hmm.
kind of an interesting path. And so, it's the same thing. Instead of letting our 3D kind of lock us away to want to say, no, 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 me, mine, and nothing else. I've got to work a lot and
My
make all the
precious.
make all this money, my precious. Yeah, Um, but instead just being open and doing, because it we spend too much time and effort trying to make money in the Western world. And it doesn't really take that much effort to do it. And I think, that's where we've been blinded, right? And to take us away from our true nature and our higher purpose by making
Hmm.
us effectively, feel like slaves and indentured servants that have to be handcuffed to a desk and working so much.
Hmm.
Because, like I said, before the Industrial Revolution, at least in our recorded timeline history, look at how people lived 200 years ago. Totally different than now.
Yep.
And are we really any better off than they were? I don't think so. We've got more things.
Sure. Maybe things are a little easier. We've got Zoom and internet and electricity and things like that, but are we happier?
Probably not. I don't know. We don't have surveys from 1632 of
Unfortunately, those all got lost. And yeah, that's
those all got lost. But to see what the happiness index was, in 1273 and whatever, right? So,
hmm.
but yeah, and so again, what's seemingly 3D is very spiritual.
Yeah. Well, listen, I knew that this discussion would be beneficial to have and to record it to make sure other people had a chance to listen to it as well. Because yes, it's something that I'm going through, but I know obviously if I'm going through it, others are going through it too.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and I've gone through it, or am going through it too.
yeah, and we're all I think to some extent going through it, but we're on different levels with it. Um, and for some people are going to get one message from it, they're going to get one lesson from this. I think there's other people who are going to get different lessons based on kind of where things are, and so I mean, which is the exact same thing of the podcast. I mean, everything is multi-layer. Um, peel back the onion, which layer we're dealing with today. So,
Hmm. Yep, yep, yep. So that was today because we're kind of coming up on the
we are
top.
coming up. Yeah,
So yeah, so that was we recorded it. It's during the spiritual campfire time frame. So again, Brad and I show up at this time, whether people are here or not. If people are here, we talk with everybody. If not, then Brad and I just talk about what we feel like we're supposed to talk about. And that was what we were supposed
let's
to
talk
talk about
today.
today. And we recorded it, so we'll put it in there. But like you said, I mean, who knows? We might decide that to just run this as a podcast episode too. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah,
What we feel like we're supposed to do with it. We just knew we were supposed to record today's session. So there you go.
yeah.
Yep. So with that, I'm gonna hit stop on the record.